Hi friends, welcome back to the ScrapbookPal YouTube channel. This is Caitlin and today I'm going to be sharing with you a card featuring the Avery Elle So Fetching stamp set and coordinating dies. As a little bit of backup, I'm also bringing in the Avery Elle oval scene dies from their Elements line, and then some foam squares from Scrapbook Adhesives, as well as some plain cardstock, some Copic friendly paper, and some craft cardstock. So I'm going to be jumping right in today with making our card. I have a side folding A2 size card base, and I'm using the oval cutout from that larger scene die set to just cut out the front of that craft panel right in the center. And I'm going to be going in with my Tombow Mono Permanent Adhesive Runner to just adhere that down to my card base. This is the scene we're going to be filling in with all kinds of fun little background designs for those sweet little pups to hang out in. I love this card because it could definitely be a Valentine's Day card, but it's also perfect for any kind of love or friendship card. Whatever needs you might have. So I went in with some plain white cardstock to cut a second one of those oval scenes and frames, as well as an extra piece for the ground and the bush that's going to go in the background, and also some clouds that I cut just from one of those scrap pieces of cardstock. So I'm adhering the extra white frame underneath the craft cardstock frame, just going in with some Lawn Fawn precision tip glue, and I'm going to layer that into the little scene just to give a tiny hint of dimension and help to kind of literally frame up what we're going to be creating without kind of taking away, because it still looks like the craft on craft. So now I'm going in with my Spun Sugar Distress ink and one of the Ranger ink blending tools and foams, and I'm just doing a light wash of this very light pink all the way around my sky. I decided to go for a little bit of a non-traditional sky today just because I really wanted to kind of bring in those Valentine's Day feels. So I also went in with a pencil just to sketch out where the ground was going to go, so I knew how far I needed to bring my color down. Or in this case up, because now I'm going in with the Kitsch Flamingo and just using little circles to blend and create an ombre so that I have a darker hot pink down near the bush and the ground, and then it fades up into that spun sugar as it goes up towards the top. I just thought this was a really fun way to bring in some extra pops of color, but obviously you could switch these out and do something a little more traditional with blue. I still wanted to bring in a little hint of blue, so I did that by using the Speckled Egg Distress ink with the same blender, just shading in the very bottom of those die cut clouds. I found that because they were smaller, it was easier for me to kind of place them back into the cardstock that I had die cut them from, instead of just trying to hold them. With the cloud or with the bush kind of background tree thing, I didn't really have that same option, so I did have to kind of just ink blend around my fingers, but I think it worked out pretty good. So this is the bundled sage that I'm using for that layer, and then the final ink color that I'm going to be blending with is the frayed burlap. I just really like this kind of muted colored story that I'm creating. It's not quite Eastery, but it's definitely not super loud, not warm and summery. It definitely has really nice, soft, kind of springy vibes. So I just went through and made sure I had a good layer of the frayed burlap. You can see it wasn't the smoothest blend ever, but that is really okay because one, it's dirt, and two, our doggies are going to be adhered over the top of most of this, so it's going to be pretty forgiving. So I went in with the liquid adhesive and glued down the ground, the back bushes, and then I waited to glue my clouds until I could see where everything was going to be sitting. But I did go ahead and add that full insert piece into the scene. This is really fun because now the ground and the bush kind of are level with the frame, but the sky looks like it's sunken back just a little bit below that frame. And I just, again, really love that little hint of texture and dimension that this gives to the project. especially without adding a ton of bulk. So now I'm going in to color up my little pups. I decided to use both of them because I did, again, want this to be kind of a love card. And so I am stamping them down with the Honeybee Stamps black ink. I love this ink for Copic Coloring. It stays put so well, and I never have to worry about letting it dry before I jump into my coloring. And I think that it's so cute that the stamp set comes with little accessories for the dogs. So I did go in and hand stamp, just with an acrylic block, the little tag that goes on this dog's collar. And I decided to color in my pups not exactly like Boston Terriers, but that was kind of the feeling that I was going for, doing more of a white and black kind of spotted dog. And so I left my coloring in pretty slow or pretty close to normal for this first dog. I am going to speed it up for the second dog because I did use all of the same kind of colors for both of them, and the shading was pretty similar. When I'm creating dark colors and, going for a black, I don't usually actually use any black. I like to go in with my neutral gray markers, and just as long as you're creating enough contrast that you have light and darker areas, that gray will read as black to the recipient or the viewer's eyes. And that way you don't lose any of the detail or kind of the characteristics of the face or, any of the details on whatever it is you're coloring. So to create white, I also then didn't want to leave any actual white space where it looked like I had kind of forgotten to color. So I went in with some really light neutral grays just to add a little bit of shading and definition around the eye and the muzzle. And now I'm going in to shade the bottom part of my pup. And again, same color story, just creating kind of shadows on the back and under parts, and then anywhere that would be like under the shirt, just kind of creating that idea of it being a more dimensional figure and a little bit of extra shading and shadows. I decided to leave a little white tail, and I went in with some RV markers to shade in the nose and that little tongue. And then that inspired me to use the same kind of RV family of markers to shade in the shirt. So I'm just going in really lightly, really quickly, adding in some general shading. I'm not overly concerned about, following an exact light source for these. I just kind of did a central light source. So the shadows on the dog on the bottom, because he's facing to the left, all of the shadows are going to be on the right hand side, and for the dog that's standing up, it's going to be the opposite. All of my shadows are going on the left hand side. When in doubt, just pick a side and go for it. Everything can be consistent all the way across if that's easier for you, but because they're facing each other and I do have this kind of daytime pinky sky theme going on, I just thought it would be fun to have a more central shadow layout. Yeah. So now you can see I've sped up my coloring just a little bit more, just so that you aren't stuck watching me color the same thing over and over again. I use those same markers, like I said, to shade in this dog, including adding his spots and the shading around his eye and his little muzzle. And then I am going to use the same RV markers as before to shade in his nose and the heart on his collar, as well as some E80 markers just to shade in the collar. So now I'm going in with the coordinating dies, and I love that the Avery Elle dies are already cut, so you don't have to worry about snipping anything apart, and just super quick and easy. Please excuse the dog hair on my desk. My dog is also black and white and kind of looks a little bit like these guys, and so she's here with us in spirit in my project with her hair on the desk. So I am going in now just to kind of get a good layout and an idea of where I want everything to go. And now that I feel good about my decisions, we are going to commit and start adhering things down with my liquid glue, as well as some of these foam squares. So for these clouds, I wanted them to overlap and come out of the oval. So I am adding liquid glue to the side that's going to be touching the frame, and one of those tiny foam squares on the side that's going on the sky, and that way it looks level and balanced the whole way across. Nothing's going to get bent or smushed. Everything is supported all the way across the little cloud. I'm going to do the same kind of thing for the dogs, although I wasn't as concerned because they are bigger pieces, and I knew that, you know, some of the areas were going to be on the ground area, which is the same level as the frame. So just, you know, kind of feel it out. You just want to make sure everything is laying nice and flat so that when you send everything in postage, nothing gets kind of bumpy as everything gets compressed and squished down. So the last step was to add my I Woof You with the liquid glue. And once I had that in place, I tried to freehand stamp the You're So Fetching sentiment onto the inside of my card, and I just didn't love how it stamped. I should have known better. I should have put it in my Misty, but my fix for that was to take a scrap of that craft cardstock. I stamped the sentiment again and added one of these little kind of hearts on a string. It almost looks like a tiny balloon or something like that, with one of the pink inks that I had used on my ink blending. I trimmed that down and I adhered it right on top, and if you didn't know, you wouldn't know. So never give up. Don't ever stress about little things like that happening. I hope that you have an amazing day. Make sure that you're checking out the ScrapbookPal Instagram and YouTube channel for even more crafty inspiration. Have an amazing week and happy crafting.